only videos are only getting posted on harkira.classics.co.in. They are not getting posted on app.100xfs.com for some time. So all videos, all resources you'll find there on harkira.classics.co.in. With that, we'll go to today's slides. It's the same as yesterday. So if you go to projects.100xfs.com and search for TypeScript, or let me just paste it in the chat as well, or Akash will. These are the slides for today. Covered the same thing yesterday. We were able to cover from here types of languages, what is TypeScript, TypeScript compiler, basic types, tsconfig. Little bit with interfaces and types. Today we will again go through interfaces, types, arrays, enums, generics. Yeah, if we do that, I think we'll be at a good spot. Generally, if you miss a class, first go to the slides, and maybe you're just able to pick it up yourself from the slides, right? So no point wasting 2 hours listening to someone when you can just waste 4 hours, but do it yourself and learn a few things yourself as well. Cool. ठीक है, मैं quick recap दे देता हूँ कल का. Yesterday, we were spending a lot of time on abstract things. I repeat, yesterday we spent a lot of time on abstract things. What do I mean when I say abstract things? मतलब ये ना भी पता हो तो काम चल जाता है. Even if you don't know these things, you'll be fine. We understood why TypeScript versus JavaScript. We understood TypeScript versus Go/Rust. We understood JS versus Rust/Go/Java. More technically, we learned about compiled versus interpreted languages. We learned about loosely typed versus strongly typed languages. This is what we did yesterday. Today, I'm going to not recover all of this. So if you did not go through yesterday's class, today's class can be a little overwhelming. If you look at this code base and don't understand anything that is happening right now, you should by the end of the class, but this is sort of where we left yesterday. And this can look a little complicated, but we'll understand what this is. So why have we gone from JavaScript to something that looks very C++ like? And how can you, if you open any code base, in TypeScript only it'll be, if you open any open source code base, a good project, you build your own, it'll be in TypeScript. So if you are going to build projects in TypeScript, you will have to understand that from first principles. That's what we're trying to do. We have already done all of this. The most simplest one, let me take you through, or the simplest thing that you need to know before you move on to interfaces and types. That is what we're going to cover today. Biggest thing we'll cover today is interfaces and types. अगर ये दोनों समझ में आ गए, if you understand both of these, everything else should be a piece of cake. Generics are also a little hard, but interfaces and types, if you understand most of the things you can do, it is good for you to know enums also. It is good for you to know generics also. But interfaces and types is going to be the prime thing you should focus on. And अगर ये समझ आ गया, ठीक है, you're good to go for whatever TypeScript projects. Let's start with some basic types in TypeScript we covered yesterday. Number, string, booleans, null, undefined. इनको primitives बुलाते हैं. Every language has these primitives. कि यार ये तो चाहिए ही चाहिए. If you're building an application, if you today try to write whatever lead code or a function toSum, which takes 2 arguments, a number a and b, or whatever the problem statement for toSum is. I forgot what the lead code problem toSum expects you to do. But you write code like this, where array is, this is like an int array. Second element is an int. If you are writing this code in C++, आप ऐसा कुछ लिखोगे. If you are writing the signature of this function in C++, you will write it something like this. कि यार integer is what this function needs to return. This is the name of the function. This is the first argument. This is the second argument. This is the type of the first argument. This is the type of the second argument. To simplify it even further, if you are writing code in TypeScript, you will write it like this. Int sum, sorry, not TypeScript, in C++. Int a, int b. And you will return a plus b from here. ऐसे ही लिखते हैं. This is how you write C++ में a function. Why is it different from JavaScript? Because JavaScript में you don't have to give types. JavaScript में you write this function sum a, b. Notice the difference between this and this. In a strongly typed language, you have to tell the types of the arguments. Okay, this is an integer. This is an integer. you have to tell the return type of the function. Okay, this function is going to return an integer. That is what this function in C++ represents, or more technically, these types in C++ represent. In JavaScript, you don't have to mention them. In TypeScript, you do. TypeScript adds some type safety on JavaScript. So if you define the same function in TypeScript, not JavaScript, TypeScript, then it will look something like this. Okay, A is of type number, B is of type number, and the function also returns a number. Something like this. This is how you will write the code in TypeScript. Notice, जो return type यहाँ है, that is being returned over here. The input arguments have types, that is being given over here and here. Let's get rid of this function. This is a valid TypeScript function. It is not a valid JavaScript function. It is a valid TypeScript function. Why are we doing this? Because type safety is very good. One very clear thing TypeScript is giving you is it is telling you कि आपके sum function को कुछ number return करना चाहिए. It is clearly giving you red squigglies over here and telling you कि यार a function whose value is declared neither undefined void or any must return a value. कि यार आपने इसकी return type number दी है. It is not returning a value. If I return a number over here, it will be happy. TypeScript error will go away. If I return a string over here, it will become unhappy again and it will tell you string is not assignable to number. So what does this tell you? This tells you that whenever you are writing code in TypeScript, the TypeScript compiler will help you from time to time. अगर आप कुछ गलत कर रहे होगे, it will run a bunch of these syntactical checks and make sure you are not missing something obvious. That is why people use TypeScript, because developers are dumb. Developers can write whatever random code. They might forget to implement this function, but TypeScript will tell them, hey, there is an error over here. A developer might be dumb and call this function with a string. And TypeScript will tell it, hey, you are trying to call this function with a string, but I expect there to be a number. That is the benefit of TypeScript. इतने sad गाने लगा रखे इन्होंने बाहर. Sorry about that. Oh, we did a poll in the meanwhile, and only 87% understand this. Okay, you should go to yesterday's class. This is simple stuff. We did yesterday, and something you need to know. अब नहीं समझ आया तो कल की क्लास में जाना पड़ेगा. Then you will come back here. Until yesterday, we understood about these primitives. Number is a primitive. I can write another function called greet. And this greet function I can say, here I will take a string as an input, the name of the person. And this function is going to return a string as well. Let's say this is another thing I have written. Okay, greet is a function, takes a string as an input, returns a string. And यहाँ पे I can return something like hello name. So this is how you would write a greet function in TypeScript. We have used the string primitive over here. Similarly, I can write a function called isEven, which will take what as an input? A number. What will it return? A boolean. And here I will write the runtime checks. If it is even number, then I will return true. If it is odd number, then I will return false. If num modulo 2 is 0, what does that mean? Number modulo 2 is 0 means the remainder of the number with 2 is 0. That means it's an even number. Else, it is an odd number. Simple enough, hopefully. If not, just have to practice a little bit more. These are primitives in TypeScript, specifically string, number, boolean, nulls, undefined. A bunch of these are primitives. These are primitive types, simple types. इसमें काम चल जाता है. You are able to build simple functions like these using it. But as your application becomes more complex, that is where you need interfaces and types. To recap, this is the way to write code in TypeScript. The code we have written is simple, बहुत basic functions हैं यहाँ पे. A greet function which takes a name as an input, returns a string. This is the actual implementation of the function. An isEven function which takes a number as an argument, returns a boolean. This is the actual implementation of the function. This is how you write simple code in TypeScript. Now we will move on to some complex code. Before we do that, do you guys know how to initialize a TypeScript project locally? If not, you should go to REPL.it, quickly sign in, create a new REPL in TypeScript. Create a new REPL in TypeScript and do the coding here today. If you are not able to run it locally, do all the coding here for now. Eventually you can do it locally as well. We have covered all of this yesterday. Here I can write the same code. If I write, if I just copy this code from here and paste it here, it is the same. If I click run over here, it will run my TypeScript code. So whatever code we are writing, you can write it directly here. Right now it did not print anything on the screen because I have defined two functions. I have not called these functions. Let me call greet. Const greeting equal to greet Harkirat. And then let's log the greeting. यहाँ से यहाँ पे एक string आ गई. यहाँ पे I have logged the string. If I run it now, you will see hello Harkirat is printed. We have written TypeScript code. We are somehow executing TypeScript code, even though that is not technically true. अभी के लिए कह लो कि we are executing TypeScript code. Go to yesterday's class to understand what are we actually doing. We are not executing TypeScript code. This TypeScript code is getting converted to a JavaScript file, which is what we're executing. But ठीक है, अभी के लिए छोड़ दो, नहीं समझ आया तो. We are going to write and practice some TypeScript code today. It's 8:15 already. This is a recap of yesterday. अब हम थोड़ी interfaces and types में जाएंगे. We'll understand what are interfaces. We will understand what are types. Something we थोड़ा discussed yesterday. We are going to recover it today from scratch. Let's go to the slides.
Hey, Kirat, can you please check the Q&A ones?
Yes, looking at it. Wow, it's spammed. Screen is lagging, video is lagging. Time to change the laptop. Time to check the CPU usage. That is actually pretty reasonable. It's fine for a few people. It's lagging for another set of people. Oh, there you go. It is 100%. What is eating up my memory? What are you, sir? Wait. It is lagging. I mean, it should lag. Look at my CPU usage. It's 100% on every core. Brave browser. Okie dokie. Time to close it. Docker. You guys are too funny. Okay, I think it'll be better now. I already see it getting better. But let me shut off Docker as well. Quit Docker desktop. Oh no, it's back to 100%. Docker. Yeah, a bunch of Dockers. All right, Docker. There we go. All right, I think that this should be much better. My CPU was being eaten up by Docker. I don't know why. I'm not running anything too out of the ordinary here. Now it's just Google Chrome and Elgato, so I think hopefully we're fine. Yeah, I think we should be fine now. Let me have my CPU monitor running here on the left, so if anything is wrong, I'll know. Cool. We will move on. Sorry about that. We are going to now understand about interfaces and types. Abhi tak, this was the code that I had written, and hopefully some of you have been able to write it as well. If not write it, hopefully you guys understand this code that is written on the screen. Very similar to JavaScript, but is actually TypeScript because of these types that I have put everywhere. The problem with these primitive types is that you can't create complex objects from them. And Kirat, what is a complex object? Something like this. If I ever want to create a user, let's say, and the user has a name, Harkirat, they have an age, 21. They have an address, which is again an object, which has a city, Chandigarh, country, India, pin code, something like this. This becomes a very complex object. बहुत सारी fields हैं इसमें. It is in fact a nested object यहाँ पे. Given this nested object, how can I define a function called is legal, whether or not this person can vote currently, which takes the user as an input and returns a boolean. It returns whether or not this person can vote. The problem is, इसकी type क्या होगी? Is user a string? No. Is user a number? No. It is an object that looks like this. So we need to provide a type to this object. We need to create our own custom type. That is what interfaces are used for. What are interfaces used for? कि if you have to create a very complex object, उसका type कैसे define करोगे? This is not a primitive type. This is not a string. It's a complex object. To define its type, you use interfaces. Here I am going to create an interface called user. Usually interfaces are written in capitals, so you should write them in capitals like this. कि यार मेरा एक नया interface है, a नया type is there, a new custom type is there called user with a capital U, and this guy has a name which is a string, primitive type. इसकी name is a string. Age is what? Age is a number. अब address is again a complex object. तो इसका address क्या है? Just another complex object like this. जहां पे I can write what is the city? It is a string. What is the country? It is a string. What is the pin code? It is a number. This is one place you use interfaces. Interfaces is used in a few other places. सबसे कॉमन यूज केस ये है कि यार ये जो यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट है मेरा, इसका टाइप ये है. इट्स टाइप इज दिस. इट इज नॉट अ स्ट्रिंग, नॉट अ नंबर, नॉट अ बूलियन, बट दिस कॉम्प्लेक्स टाइप दैट आई डिफाइंड. इंटरफेसेस आर यूज्ड फॉर डिफाइनिंग योर ओन कस्टम टाइप्स. आई हैव डिफाइंड माइन फॉर द यूजर. अब मैं कह सकता हूं गिवन दिस कॉम्प्लेक्स यूजर ऑब्जेक्ट, लेट मी मिनिमाइज इट, कि यार इसका टाइप इज गोइंग टू बी यूजर. मुझे लिखने की जरूरत भी नहीं है. आई डोंट हैव टू एक्सप्लिसिटली टेल दिस कि लेट यूजर कोलन यूजर. बट इफ आई डू राइट दिस, अब अगर मैं इसको पिन कोड नहीं दूंगा, इट विल स्टार्ट टू कंप्लेन. इट विल फोर्स मी कि यार आपकी टाइप तो ये है कस्टम डिफाइंड बहुत अच्छी सी, प्लीज इंट्रोड्यूस पिन कोड एज वेल. इफ आई रिमूव एज फ्रॉम हियर, it will tell me, if I hover over it, what does it say? Property age is missing in type, whatever this type is. So, if you give explicit types like this, up right side pe, you can't write anything that doesn't match this type. And to do it for a complex object, you use interfaces. Now can I say, कि यार, this is legal function is going to take what as an input? A variable user. But what is the type of this user? It is this user interface that I have created. Kya function is legal, takes something of this type, this complex type as input, and returns a boolean. अब यहाँ पे I can write my actual logic, which is going to be return user dot. What will it be? User dot. Can you see? I get very nice type checking. क्या कहते हैं इसको? Write ahead, whatever you call it. The LSP is helping me. कि यार address and age, these are the two things this can be, because I have given it a type. बिकॉज मैंने यूजर को डिफाइन कर दिया अच्छे से. I have said कि users input is this user interface. The LSP is helping me कि हाँ भाई, it will be one of these two. I can't write something. If I write R, it doesn't help me. But if I write A, it gives me two suggestions कि यार address और age. If I hover over address, it also tells me what does address looks like. तो अब अगर ये दूसरी फाइल में present होता, if this interface was present in a separate file, it would have been so easy for me to infer कि अच्छा age is the type. And what do I want to return? If it is greater than 18, I want to return true. Else I want to return false. This is one way to write it. But if you want to get simpler, you can write user.age is greater than equal to 18. Return true. Else return false. Does that make sense? Define an interface. Define a variable of the type that interface. Define a function which takes a variable as an input, which is also of type interface, and then your body over here. Function has been defined. Has the function been called yet? No. So let's call the function. What can I pass inside? Can I simply pass the age? No. TypeScript compiler is complaining. Can I pass a string? I cannot. Can I pass an empty object? I cannot. I have to pass something that is of type user. So I can pass this user object. This will return me a true or a false. Uske basis पे I can log whatever I want on the screen. So if I really want to log something, so I will write const answer equal to is legal of user. If answer, then console.log I am legal, else I am illegal. Or whatever. I can vote, I cannot vote. That's probably a better way to say it. But now it prints I am legal because the user had age 21. If I change this age to 5, then it will print I am illegal. A lot of code we have written. Very hard to digest this code. So again, let's go over it step by step. Defining an interface. Ours is a slightly complex interface. Has a name, age. Notice there is no, I can't put numbers over here. I actually can put numbers also. If the name can only be Harkirat, so you can also put Harkirat over here if you want. Or let's say, you only want to support two users, Harkirat and Raman. So you can also do this. You can also put strings over here. इसका मतलब है कि name can only be either Harkirat or Raman. Name cannot be something random. If I put something random, it starts to complain. So you can actually put strings over here as well, numbers over here as well. But since we want it to be a generic string, we say name is a string, age is a number, address is a complex object, which again has 3 fields over here. We define the variable, we define the function, we call the function and log it. Can we do a quick poll? Do we understand the basics of interfaces? इसके बाद we'll dive a little bit deeper into slightly more complex things. But do we understand what an interface is used for? Great. Now here comes 2 small assignments for you. You can't think about it. You will have to Google them. But let's say I want to make address optional. Here, this should also support. Let user2 equal to :user equal to name Raman, age 22. I want कि ये जो type है इसमें ये optional हो जाए. Address becomes optional. तो what can I do? I can either say कि यार you can be undefined or you can be this. That is one thing I can do, one ugly way. That also doesn't work. Address is undefined. That doesn't work. यहाँ पे भी I have to then address undefined. Yeah, that doesn't work. I was trying something, failed it right at my head. That is why should not try new things in a live class. What I was trying was or hoping was कि मैं लिख दूंगा address या तो undefined है or this is a or operator. You don't have to put 2 ors over here like in C++ or during runtime. यहाँ पे you just have to put a single vertical line, whatever this is called. It can either be this और भी दिस. बट द प्रॉब्लम अगेन रिमेन्स कि अगर आपने कहा अनडिफाइंड हो सकती है तो यू हैव टू एक्सप्लिसिटली मार्क इट एज अनडिफाइंड. यू कांट जस्ट नॉट डिफाइन इट. ये कंप्लेन करने लग जाएगा. तो दिस तो डिड नॉट वर्क. हाउ कैन आई मेक इट ऑप्शनल? हाउ कैन आई राइट समथिंग लाइक डॉट ऑप्शनल यहां पे? कैन आई समहाउ मेक इट ऑप्शनल? The answer is yes. It's a very common use case, which is why to make a specific key optional, you just have to add question mark over here. Question mark colon means it can exist, it cannot exist also. तभी यहां पे if you see, this does not complain, neither does this complain. This does have an address, this does not have an address. Both of them are of type user because address is an optional field. It is not a required field. What happens when I do, let me hide the error. Do you think this will work? Address, pin code, something. Do you think I can do this now? I said address is optional. Can I not write address with pin code? मैंने तो ऑप्शनल कहा था. I said the full key is optional. अगर एड्रेस डिफाइन हो रहा है, if it is getting defined, then you need all three fields. Either don't define it at all, or when you define it, you have to define all three fields. Partially नहीं कर सकते. Partially करना है तो make the other fields internally optional as well. Here address is optional, but if the user does give an address, pin code is the only required thing. City is also optional, country is also optional. So whenever you are writing TypeScript code where you want optional fields, अगर आपने इसको optional बोल दिया but these are required, तो अगर एड्रेस डाला है तो फिर तो तीनों डालने पड़ेंगे. इफ यू हैव पुट द एड्रेस, यू हैव टू पुट ऑल थ्री. इफ यू ओनली पुट पिन कोड, इट विल कंप्लेन. यू कैन सी अ रेड स्क्विगली हियर. इफ आई डोंट पुट एनीथिंग, दैट इज फाइन, दैट वर्क्स. दैट इज हाउ यू डू ऑप्शनल पैरामीटर्स इन TypeScript. That was the one extra thing I wanted to talk about. One small thing also we will talk about. Then we will, move on to some more complex objects. ये मैंने डिफाइन तो कर दिया यहां पे एड्रेस. लेट मी गेट रिड ऑफ द ऑप्शनल फील्ड हियर. आई हैव डिफाइंड इट लाइक दिस, बट लेट्स से आई वांट टू डिफाइन अनदर टाइप कॉल्ड इंटरफेस ऑफिस. अब ऑफिस का भी तो एड्रेस होता है. एवरी यूजर माइट हैव देयर ओन एड्रेस एंड ऑफिस माइट ऑल्सो हैव एन एड्रेस. फील्ड विल लुक वेरी सिमिलर. Office has an address, user has an address. Address field looks exactly the same in both the places. Are we repeating ourselves? If in the future I want to introduce house number over here, will I have to introduce it in two different places? What rule of computer science is this defying? इसमें क्या गंदी चीज है? Don't repeat yourself. If there is some code that is being repeated in two different places, you should put it together somewhere else so that you only have to change it in one place. So interfaces can also use other interfaces. I repeat, interfaces mein name can be a string, it can be a number, it can also be another interface. So can I take this common logic here, remove it, here, remove it, and create a fresh interface called address. Okay, this is an interface called address, and address will be of type address over here, address will be of type address over here. One interface can use another interface. This is just a custom type that I have defined that I can use in other interfaces. अब मुझे अगर कोई फंक्शन भी लिखना है, I can write my own function which takes just the address as an input, or it can take the user as an input, or it can take the office as an input. Key thing being कि अब अगर house number remove करना है, I only have to remove it from one place. I don't have to remove it from here also and here also. Why is this beneficial? Because if they are part of separate files, I will forget to change it in the other place. I will change it in one place, forget to change it in the other place. That will cause problems, which is why whenever you are repeating code, put it together in a central place. That is what is address interfaces. And now we are using it here and here. Do we understand these two things? Optional parameters, interfaces using other interfaces. ये समझ आ गए? Let's do a quick poll. Great. 94% is beautiful. Quick recap. What are interfaces? How can you assign types to objects? For that, you need interfaces. If you have an object like this, you can create a corresponding interface for it. There is an assignment over here, very similar. We have already done it, so let's not redo it. Create a function called isLegal that returns true or false if a user is above 18, and it takes a user as an input. Same thing we wrote over here. A function called isLegal, it takes a user as an input, returns true or false based on whether or not this user is above 18 years of age. Assignment number 2 is how to do interfaces in React. कल ये थोड़ा ऊपर से निकल गया था. So let me not do it right now. I will eventually do it. Here is the solution. Just like you can do interfaces in Node.js, you can do them in React as well. You need to do them in React as well. But अभी यहाँ नहीं जाते. We will come back to this, don't worry. Let's finish types first. Then if need be, we will come back to React. See how types are implemented in React. अब interface एक और चीज देते हैं. Interface give you one more thing. How many of you have heard of interfaces in Java? Okay, you write an interface, then you write a class that implements that interface. It's a very common concept in Java or object-oriented languages. Interfaces have another special property. You can implement interfaces as a class. You might have heard of abstract classes in Java. Exist in JavaScript as well. They are very similar. Interfaces and abstract classes are very similar. There is some small differences, but mota you can use both of them for similar things. Let's see how. Let's say we created a person interface that looks like this. It has a name, age, and a greet function. It has three things: a name, primitive, age, primitive. Greet is a function. It is not a simple primitive. The type of greet is a function. Let's say I have created this interface. I can implement this interface as a class. So इसके लिए you need to know what are classes. If you don't know what are classes in JavaScript, then this will be a little hard. But let's try to see what it is trying to say here. Here, if you have an interface called people, which has, let's say, a name which is a string, age which is a number, and a third parameter called, what was it? Greet, which is a function. A function which doesn't take anything as input and returns a string. This is one way to write it, or you can write it like this. Either is fine. Both mean the same thing. यहाँ पे I've used the arrow function syntax. Here I've used the normal function syntax. Both of these mean the same thing. कि greet एक function है. That function does not take anything as an input. It returns a string. तो अगर मुझे एक object बनाना होगा of this people type, try this assignment. Create an object called person of this people type. Can you try to do it? Greet should just greet the person, which means, let's say it should just say hi. That is it. It should just return hi, even simpler. The greet function should just return hi. Name and age should be there. Create a new variable of the people type or the people interface, whatever, that conforms to the people interface. Ten more seconds. I'm assuming it's simple enough. something like this. Person is of type people. It has a name, string, age, number, and a greet function, which simply returns hi. If I call person dot greet, what will it return? It will return hi to me. So if I do let greeting equal to person dot greet and then try to log the greeting, then what will get printed on the screen? Let's try it out. Hi gets printed on the screen. Look at it again. Interface people, only extra thing is greet is a function and not a primitive. It is a primitive, a function like simple primitive, not too difficult, nothing too complicated. Arguments return type. Ab agar this took something as an input, then I would have written that here as well. Okay, greet takes, whatever, gender as an input, which is a string, and returns hi sir or hi ma'am, something like that. So you can make this more complicated, but to keep things simple, greet is a function, returns a string, doesn't take any arguments. That is what I've defined here. इसको हटा दूं तो क्या होगा? It will start to complain. If this doesn't return a string but returns a number, what will happen? It will start to complain. The signature is clearly mentioned here. Function needs to follow that signature. It cannot return a number when a string is required. ठीक है? That is how you create interfaces with functions. इसमें problem क्या है? The problem is the greet function cannot use the name. It is very hard for me to write something like this plus this dot name. I can't write this. This is a simple variable. I can try doing something like this. That works. कि person यहाँ define होते होते ही greet person dot name हो गया. But this is exactly why classes were introduced, if you know what classes are. Why does one use classes अगर objects exist करते ही हैं? In JavaScript, there are objects, something like this, let user equal to name Harkirat. This is an object. Then JavaScript also has this concept of classes. We have covered this in a class, so I hope you understand it. This is how you create a class in JavaScript. Class, class rectangle, let's say, which has a constructor, if you remember, and can have some member functions like area, which let's say prints the area of this rectangle, so on and so forth. This is how you create a class. And then you can create objects of this class. There is a very big difference between objects when I use it over here and objects when I use it over here. इसमें और इसमें बहुत फर्क है. They are not the same things. Whenever I call let rect equal to new rectangle, this is me creating a new object of the rectangle class. This is me creating a random object. You can call this something else. Call this key value pair. ये ऑब्जेक्ट और ये ऑब्जेक्ट एकदम अलग है, कोई रिलेशन नहीं है, वेरी डिफरेंट थिंग्स. दिस ऑब्जेक्ट और लेट्स कॉल इट अ की वैल्यू पेयर एंड दिस ऑब्जेक्ट आर वेरी डिफरेंट. दिस ऑब्जेक्ट इज द implementation of a class. This is a random object. When you create interfaces, just like we created one over here, this one right here, तो आप उस इंटरफेस का ऑब्जेक्ट भी बना सकते हो सिंपल सा, और you can create a class that implements that interface. I repeat, what did we do? सबसे पहले तो we created an interface. Interface is a TypeScript phenomena. It is not a JavaScript phenomena. JavaScript में interface exist नहीं करता, TypeScript में exist करता है. Using this interface, I can create a normal object वी हैव ऑलरेडी डन इट ओवर हियर. इस इंटरफेस का मैंने एक ऑब्जेक्ट बना दिया. आई कैन क्रिएट अ क्लास दैट implements this interface. Let's say it's the user interface. Both of these serve slightly different purposes. ये तो is just the variable declaration. This is used in Java also. In Java also, you create interfaces and create classes that implements interfaces. Same thing now you can do in TypeScript as well. I would say it's heavily inspired from the Java world. Okay, create interface and create a class that implements that interface. Once you have created the class, इस class से you can create various objects. This object and this object are very different. We have done the left part. Created an interface, created an object out of that interface. We have not done the right part yet. We have created an interface. We are yet to create a class that implements this interface. So let's do that next. Given this interface, I have created a variable. Let's create a class that implements this interface. What does implementing it mean? We will come to very soon. But सबसे पहले, let's create a class called manager, because a manager is also a person, a employee is also a person, house whatever, house help is also a person, manager is also a person. So all of these classes I can now, I know for a fact कि इन सब में नाम तो होगा ही, एज तो होगा ही, ग्रीटिंग भी होगी. यू ग्रीट अ पर्सन, यू ग्रीट अ मैनेजर. तो all of them can implement the people interface. What does implementing it mean? It means, अब देखो रेड स्क्विगली आ गई. It is saying कि क्लास मैनेजर इनकरेक्टली इंप्लीमेंट्स पीपल. इट इज मिसिंग दीज प्रॉपर्टीज. वो कह रहा है कि यार ये प्रॉपर्टीज इसमें होनी चाहिए, इसमें है नहीं. तो नाउ वील अंडरस्टैंड हाउ यू राइट क्लासेस इन TypeScript. They are a little different from how you write classes in JavaScript. थोड़ा सा फर्क है, टाइप्स आ जाएंगे और तो कुछ नहीं. तो सबसे पहले यू हैव टू डिफाइन कि मेरे पास क्या क्या प्रिमिटिव्स हैं. व्हाट ऑल प्रिमिटिव्स विल माय मैनेजर क्लास हैव? व्हाट विल इट हैव? अ नेम एंड एन एज. नेम इज अ स्ट्रिंग, एज इज अ नंबर. यार ये दोनों विल बी अटैच्ड टू द मैनेजर क्लास. दैट इज फर्स्ट थिंग यू हैव टू डू. इनिशियलाइज, नॉट इवन इनिशियलाइज, जस्ट टेल TypeScript कि ये दोनों रहेंगे. अ नेम विल बी अटैच्ड टू द मैनेजर, एन एज विल बी अटैच्ड टू द मैनेजर. व्हाट डू आई मीन व्हेन आई से अटैच्ड? आई मीन आप दिस डॉट नेम कर सकते हो वेन एवर यू क्रिएट एन ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द क्लास. वेन एवर यू हैव क्रिएटेड एन ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ द क्लास, you can find the name of the user by calling whatever rect.name, or for rectangle it will be width or height. So these two lines of code you have to write to tell the TypeScript compiler कि ये दोनों मेरे attributes हैं. And in the constructor you can take the name and the age as an input. You can automatically define it, doesn't matter. The point is, ideally यहां पे आप नेम एक इनपुट ही लोगे एंड एज एक इनपुट ही लोगे. यार नेम एंड एज आर इनपुट्स टू माय फंक्शन, टू माय कंस्ट्रक्टर. व्हाट इज अ कंस्ट्रक्टर? इफ यू रिमेंबर क्लासेस, जब भी आप एक नया इंस्टेंस बनाते हो, व्हेनेवर यू क्रिएट अ न्यू इंस्टेंस ऑफ अ क्लास, द कंस्ट्रक्टर गेट्स कॉल्ड. दिस गेट्स कॉल्ड टू create the object, to initialize the object, to construct the object. So over here I will initialize my corresponding name and my whatever attached name and attached age. यहां पे मैं लिखूंगा कि यार this dot name equal to name, this dot age equal to age. कि जो भी rectangle मैनेजर बना रहा है, whoever is making an object of this manager class, whoever is doing this needs to pass me in a name and an age. And तभी मैं construct करूंगा. I will only construct if a name and an age is provided to me. And जो भी name और age बंदे ने भेजी है, whatever has been provided to me, I will set my attached name to be that, my age to be that. Let's not worry about anything else right now. Greet को भी comment कर देते हैं. Let's just stay over here. Interface name तो बिठा देते हैं. And a class that implements this interface. Simple enough. No functions, nothing else. Harkirat, can I not simply create an object? Why can I not simply do let person equal to whatever, name and age? You can do it, but classes give you benefits like inheritance. You can extend one class from another. So it might make sense in a few cases to create classes that implement these interfaces rather than creating raw variables. वो भी कर सकते हो, कर ही रहे थे हम. But in some cases, it makes sense to do this, although this is done very rarely. When this is done, an interface isn't used, an abstract class is used. But this is just one thing an interface provides, so we need to understand it. Let's try to create a new object of the manager class. What am I trying to do? This object I am trying to create from this manager class, not this object. Let user equal to new manager John, 30. This is the name of the manager. This is what comes over here. This is the age of the manager. This is what comes over here. They get attached to this instance of this object. ये तो classes से शायद याद होगा कि whenever you call the constructor, you can set name and age on this instance, which means this user instance. कि इस object का, this object has this name, this object has this age, and then whatever you can. For example, log user dot name or user dot age. Simple enough. If you don't complicate it with functions, an interface is something a class can implement. What does implementing it mean? कि यार age और number चाहिए. अगर आप age को set नहीं करोगे, if there is no member age or no member name, TypeScript will start to complain कि it is incorrectly implementing the interface. You can add more fields, that is fine. Number, string. और fields आप add भी नहीं कर सकते. I thought you can do that. Oh, you can do that. I've just not initialized it here. There you go. You can add extra things, but इतना तो चाहिए ही चाहिए. Name तो चाहिए ही चाहिए. Age का initializer तो चाहिए ही चाहिए. These two member attributes should definitely exist. Number extra आ गया कोई बात नहीं. It still implements the people interface. Extra चीजें आ जाएं ठीक है, कम चीजें नहीं आनी चाहिए. Do we understand this implementation of a class implementing an interface? We are creating a class that implements an interface. We are not creating a fresh object of that interface. A class that implements that interface, using it over here, or creating a new object of that class over here. Over here. थोड़ा सा मुश्किल हो गया. Very quick Q&A for 2 minutes. Then we will proceed. What seems jarring? Oh my God, why is this scrolling? Okay. Is implements the equivalent of extends in Java? No. Extends is something else. Extends lets you, extend classes. Recap, and extend. All right, cool. Extends and implements are very different things. Extends is a object-oriented phenomena. If I have a class called shape, which will have, a function called area, which let's say for now just logs, hi, I am area. Then I can create 2 new classes that extend shape. Class rectangle extends shape. Extend करने का मतलब क्या होता है कि rectangle will now automatically have the area function. I can add more things. कि यार I'm going to have a width over here, which is a number, a height over here, which is going to be a number, and then whatever constructor, which will initialize the width and the height. Width to be 1, this dot height to be 2. one thing about extending is कि whenever you extend another class, कंस्ट्रक्टर के टॉप पे आपको सुपर कॉल करना पड़ता है. दिस मीन्स कॉल द कंस्ट्रक्टर ऑफ द पेरेंट क्लास. आई रिपीट, whenever one class that you are creating extends another class called shape, inside the constructor you have to call super. That means कि जिसको मैं extend कर रहा हूं ना उसका भी constructor call कर दो. Of course this guy doesn't have a constructor so nothing gets called, but you have to add super over here. It means कि अगर इसका constructor होता कुछ, and let's say the constructor expected some number as an input, तो यहां पे you would have had to pass that number. मैं बनने से पहले मेरा बाप तो बनेगा. Before I get created, my parent class will also get created, right? So that is what super over here means. It calls the constructor of the parent class and then just width and height is set. What is the benefit of extending? कि आपको इसकी implementation भी मिल जाती है. Now I can create a new rectangle, const r equal to new rectangle, and I can call r dot area. Area is not even defined in the rectangle class. It is defined over here. I can call it because rectangle extends shape. अगर ये shape में है तो यहाँ तो automatically आ गया because it extends the shape class. That is what extends to. Actually gets the implementation of the parent class. I am extending something. किसी चीज को बड़ा कर रहा हूं. I am extending it. Implementing is something different. कुछ दिखा हुआ है मैं same बना रहा हूं. I am implementing something. तो if I define an interface called user, क्या जो यूजर है उसका एक नेम होगा और एक एज होगा. I can create a class called manager which doesn't extend, it implements the user. What does that mean? कि यार ये जो यूजर है इसके कुछ की एट्रीब्यूट्स हैं. I am going to implement them. उनकी implementation मैं लिखूंगा. I am not extending it. I am implementing it. I will implement it myself. I will follow its blueprint to create something similar. एक name है, एक age है. यही दो चीजें इसको यहां चाहिए थी. These are my member variables that I have defined. And constructor में मैंने लिखा है कि जो भी बंदा मैनेजर बनाएगा, whenever a new manager is created, const m equal to new manager, Harkirat 21. Whenever a new manager is created, ये जो m वेरिएबल बना है इस पे नेम को सेट कर दो जो भी कंस्ट्रक्टर में आया, एज को सेट कर दो जो भी कंस्ट्रक्टर में आया. द नेम एंड एज गेट अटैच्ड टू दिस m वेरिएबल. आई कैन नाउ कॉल m dot name and m dot age. That is how you implement an interface. Very different from extending a class. You can also extend something here, implement something and extend something else. But to keep it simple, this is what we are doing. This was very simple. इसका तो कोई point ही नहीं है. Why would you want to do this if you just create a normal object? Just create this. Why are we doing this? Because यहाँ पे आप functions भी add कर सकते हो. कि यार the blueprint of a user is they have a name and an age and they have an is लीगल फंक्शन. कि हर यूजर चाहे वो मैनेजर है, टुमारो वी माइट क्रिएट अ न्यू क्लास कॉल्ड एम्प्लॉय, ऑल ऑफ देम नीड टू हैव एन इज लीगल फंक्शन. अब मुझे नहीं पता उसकी इंप्लीमेंटेशन क्या है. आई एम नॉट पुटिंग द इंप्लीमेंटेशन इन द इंटरफेस. इंप्लीमेंटेशन कुछ भी हो, फंक्शन होना चाहिए. तो एज सुन एज आई एडेड इट हियर, मैनेजर क्लास स्टार्टेड टू कंप्लेन कि इज लीगल तो यहां नहीं है. एंड हेंस I can introduce an is legal function over here that needs to return a boolean. I need to return this dot age is greater than 18. I have a blueprint of a user. I have implemented the blueprint of the user by constructing the name and the age and creating this function that whatever returns whether or not this object is legal, whether or not this user is legal. So now I can call m dot is legal. That will return me true or false based on whether or not I am above 18. Since I am 21, it should return a true. Let's try to run it. It does return a true. This is the major part of why you implement interfaces. You don't need to implement interfaces, or whatever. You can we could have just created an object. इतनी मेहनत करने की जरूरत थोड़ी थी. We could have just done this. Let user equal to name Harkirat, age 21 is legal. अब यहाँ पे थोड़ी प्रॉब्लम आती है कि is legal ठीक है as a function. It doesn't take anything as input. Returns a boolean. तो यहाँ पे अभी के लिए तो मैं ये कर दूंगा user dot age is greater than 18. Then return true, else return false. But what if I want to in the future create a god? God extends the user. मेरे को एक क्लास बनानी है, एक गॉड क्लास बनानी है. That needs to extend the user. अब इसमें तो कोई ऑब्जेक्ट ओरिएंटेड प्रॉपर्टीज ही नहीं है. This तो does not let anyone else extend it. Which is why from time to time, even though very rarely, you will create classes like these which implement an interface. Now this manager class I can extend. I can write class God extends manager, something like this. And I can add a constructor, call super, so on and so forth. So I can totally do this. Now the God class will also take name and age as the input. It will call the parent constructor with name and age. And यहाँ से you can do 10 different things. So this is why you might want to do it, so that कल को आपको अगर एक God class बनानी है, that can extend the manager class. That is why you might want to create a class that implements an interface. Most of the times, you don't have to create a class. आप सिर्फ ये object बनाते हो, you are good to go. Sometimes you have to do this. Do we now understand interfaces and implementing them? इसके बाद एक और concept है abstract classes. Then we'll move on to types. सोई और गिर गई है तो यार. Q&A time. 5-minute break for everyone. Q&A for everyone else. If the interface had a different type, then again defining it in class, is it not repeating itself? Yeah, you don't have to do that. Recently, Sargam told me this. You don't have to do this. You can just pass it to the constructor. And that also works. ऐसा ही कुछ करना होता है. I totally forgot what it was. Sure, I get it. I get what you're saying. You have to do it twice, Harkirat. यहाँ पे भी किया है, यहाँ पे भी किया है. There is a shorthand for this, which I am forgetting.
I sent it in the chat.
And Akash sent it in the chat. So let's look at it.
It's called parameter properties.
It's called parameter properties. Type should offer special syntax for turning constructor parameters into class properties. How does it look like? Constructor. This thing, no body necessary. But that's what I have, right?
Use public.
You have to make them public. Public name string, public age string. There you go. अब तो ठीक है. अब तो I did not have to write any extra repeated logic. This is another shorthand for doing the same thing. This will do the same thing. यहाँ पे आपको उनको define कर देगा. यहाँ पे उनको this dot x call कर देगा. Why are we not writing a function inside the class? Oh, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do this. Function is legal. When you define a function in a class, you can do it like this, or you can do it like this. Is legal. Sorry, equal to. There you go. You can either do this if you want to define a function in class, or you can do this. You don't have to write the function keyword in a class. Why would I write interface? I have to code all over again in class. Why do you create interface user name string? Let user equal to name string. Why have I created a special interface over here? ताकि मैं ये कर पाऊं ना, मैं उसको कह पाऊं कि भाई अगर तूने गलती से कुछ मिस कर दिया, then this is the single point that everything needs to follow. Everything needs to follow this. User 1 और user 2 और user 3. ये एक single blueprint है जो सबको follow करना है. And similarly, if I've defined this interface, अभी तो one manager class is implementing this interface. I might have another one, class employee. which implements this user interface. So that is why, even though you are rewriting it again, whatever, this is the blueprint. 10 different people can implement this blueprint. That is why, or whatever. That's why you need to define it separately. Because we will not just create one class. We will create multiple classes that implement it. नहीं सर आ रहा कुछ भी. Let's get a good working example on implementing and extending. एक बार हिंदी में please. So can we do interface user implements user? All right, someone give some example. Let's see if it's a more understandable one. ये कौन सी लैंग्वेज में लिखा है भाई? जावा में है क्या? ओ या this was a full. Let's move forward. All right, cool. I agree. Skip this. Move this in an offline class, and then we move on. I agree. Cool, guys. That's all we will do. Here, one more thing. I'll create an offline video explaining this, even though you rarely use it. Like you rarely extend classes. Implement classes. Most of the times, interface है तो उसको आप as a type use करते हो. ये आप use करते ही नहीं हो, बहुत कम करते हो. ये जानना इसलिए पड़ता है. Because this is one of the biggest differences between interfaces and types, which is a interview question. कि what is the difference between interfaces and types? अभी हम interfaces पढ़ रहे हैं. We are learning interfaces. Next time we'll learn types. One common interview question is what is the difference between them? दोनों बहुत same चीजें करनी है. तो one of the differences is कि you can implement interfaces as classes. You can't do that. That is the only reason you have to know it. Rarely do you actually implement it. But एक और चीज मैं जल्दी से बता देता हूँ, which is abstract classes which are very similar to interfaces. You can create something called abstract classes, which again is a concept that exists in Java as well. This is also very similar. It is a blueprint of what you are doing. So, something like this. Greet.
I shared one example in chat.
Yeah, thank you. इसमें क्या कमी है लेकिन? Why is it expecting me to implement it? Do you know AK?
Method should be abstract.
That is true. Abstract greet. There you go. So this is nothing to do with interfaces. This is a follow-up question. कि what is the difference between interfaces and abstract classes then? जब आपसे पूछेंगे, the first thing will be asked is difference between types and interfaces. आप बता दोगे कि interfaces can be implemented as classes. Second question would be what is the difference between an abstract class and interface? तो an abstract class बहुत similar है to an interface. Abstract का मतलब क्या होता है कि भाई implementation कुछ नहीं है. It is abstract. ऊपर से बता रहा हूं. Implement बाद में खुद से करना है. That is what abstract means. So this abstract class can also be implemented. So class employee implements user, and here again we have a constructor which again we'll have to have a name. सब कुछ same है एकदम, same as implementing an interface. And since there is a greet function, I have to implement that as well. So if you look at it, ये तो एकदम सेम ही लग रहा है. Rather than creating an interface, I created an abstract class. But when I am implementing it, the implementation though is exactly the same. Rather than implementing an interface, I am implementing an abstract class. The reason abstract classes are different is because इसमें आप default implementation भी दे सकते हो. For example, whatever, hello, console.log, hi there, something like this. In case of an abstract class, you can give default implementations as well. Or you have to extend it or what? One second. Super. Great. इसमें क्या कमी है? Real quick, 1 second, one more time with me. We have an abstract class which has an abstract method and a implemented method. If you do implement this, it complains, class employee implementation, did you mean to extend it? No, I didn't mean to, or maybe you do. Do you implement or extend abstract classes? Let's see. Must implement that method. Any class that extends a class with an abstract method must implement that method. So you do extend them, you don't implement them. Extends user, and what is the other thing? Okay, when you have this hello function here, agreed, but extend class employee defines it as an instance. Oh, okay, so you can just do this. Greet.
Try to add override there because you are overriding the
Hold on. What is the syntax here? इसमें क्या कमी है भाई? One 30 more second detour I'll take. If I'm not able to fix it, we'll proceed. Okay, let's change this. Greet. Okay, there you go. We'll figure out how to do it the other way also. But I have defined an abstract method here called greet. I have implemented that method over here. I also have a default implementation. मतलब यही फर्क है basically. The difference that I wanted to show between implementing an interface and implementing a class is when you are implementing a class or an abstract class, then the abstract class can have default implementations. एक hello function यहाँ already implemented है. Interface में वो चीज़ नहीं कर सकते. If you have an interface, whatever user2 let's say, which has a name, you can't have a hello function with its default implementation कि वो कुछ कर रहा हो. This is not even present in the JavaScript file, right? Interfaces तो JavaScript file में present भी नहीं होते हैं. These are only part of the TypeScript file, never get compiled to the JavaScript file. तो यहाँ पे you can't have default implementations. Abstract classes में you can. So to recap what we were doing after we understood shuru wala interfaces was, number one, implementing interfaces. Why were we doing this? So we understand types versus interface or answer this question in an interview. Second thing we understood was abstract classes versus interfaces. कि अगर interface कुछ कर ही रहे हैं ये चीज, if a class can implement an interface, what is the point of an abstract class? If this is the question, the answer is कि an abstract class can have default implementations as well. An interface cannot. जब आप interface करते हो उसमें आप default function नहीं लिख सकते. यहाँ पे you can write a default implementation of a function. You know, whenever you create an object of this employee class now, you can call .hello over there. Cool. All right, we will proceed. I will cover this in an offline video again. Interfaces, and more specifically just implementing interfaces, I would assume. Let's move on to types next. Types are very similar to interfaces. बहुत कम फर्क है. तभी तो this is a very common interview question. Okay, what is the difference between types and interfaces? Because both are very similar. A type lets you aggregate data together, very similar to interfaces. Syntax थोड़ा अलग है. If this is how you define an interface, age number. If this is how you define an interface, you define a type like this. They do both do very similar things. You can't do some things with types, can't do some things with interfaces. बट दोनों बहुत सेम ही चीज करते हैं. द डिफरेंस इज इन हाउ यू डिफाइन देम. दिस इज हाउ यू डिफाइन एन इंटरफेस. कोई इक्वल टू नहीं है यहाँ पे. आई डू नॉट हैव टू डू इंटरफेस यूजर इक्वल टू. देयर इज एन इक्वल टू ओवर हियर. टाइप यूजर इक्वल टू. सो whenever you're defining a type, you define it like this. You define an interface like this. Both are doing the exact same thing जो अभी तक हमने देखी थी. Okay, if I define a function called is legal, it can now take the user type as an input. It is not taking the user interface as an input. It is taking the user type as an input over here. And यहाँ पे I can write whatever my logic is. So that is the first thing that a type is, which is exactly the same as what an interface is. कोई फर्क नहीं है. The way you define it is different. Interface में there is no equal to. Type में there is an equal to. Interface, user to, name, string. That's how you define an interface. That's how you define a class. यहाँ पे बस एक equal to आता है, यहाँ पे equal to नहीं आता. इसको छोड़ के अभी तक तो कोई फर्क नहीं है. नो डिफरेंस बिटवीन एन इंटरफेस एंड अ क्लास. बट यू कांट इंप्लीमेंट अ टाइप. जो हमने इंप्लीमेंटेशन लास्ट टाइम पे थोड़ी थोड़ी समझी. यू कैन इंप्लीमेंट अ क्लास, इंप्लीमेंट एन इंटरफेस इन अ क्लास. यू कांट डू दैट विद अ टाइप. दैट इज द फर्स्ट डिफरेंस. दैट सेकेंड डिफरेंस इज टाइप्स लेट यू डू यूनियंस एंड इंटरसेक्शंस. ये एक बड़ा डिफरेंस और आता है. व्हेनेवर दिस इज आस्क्ड इन एन इंटरव्यू, क्या फर्क है? वैसे तो कोई फर्क नहीं है, बट इफ यू हैव टू निट पिक यू फाइंड दीज डिफरेंसेस कि अच्छा, वन थिंग यू कैन नॉट डू इन इंटरफेसेस इज यूनियंस एंड इंटरसेक्शंस. हरकीरत, व्हाट इज यूनियंस एंड इंटरसेक्शंस? लेट्स से देयर इज अ टाइप कॉल्ड यूजर. व्हाट डज द यूजर हैव? हैज अ नेम, हैज एन एज. लेट्स से देयर इज अनदर टाइप called, oh god, need to think of a better example, student. A student has a name also, an age also, and it has a grade, which could be A positive, things like these. How do you define a type? Type, the name of the type, equal to the final type. Type student equal to this. Now let's say I want to create something like type college student. And let's say a user also has, what is something that a user has but a student doesn't? Akash, any ideas? Parent. Oh. Parent name, which is, let's say, money. Okay. No, I think parent name is fine. Parent name, यूजर की हमें ये तीन चीजें चाहिए मान लो, या मान लिया, तो वैसे स्टूडेंट में ज्यादा मेक सेंस करता है. नीड टू थिंक ऑफ अ बेटर एग्जाम्पल. स्लाइड्स में है कोई?
CGPA.
Now we need something here that's not here. Okay, that's a good example. Let's go with intersection, and let's try to see this different example. Forget the example that I was trying to give. It's a little weird. Doesn't show what we want to show. Let's look at intersections first. Unions पे बाद में आएंगे. What if you want to create a type that has every property of multiple types? Let's say there is a type called employee which has a name and a start date. A type called manager which has a name and a department. What if I want a type which has a name, a start date, and a department? तीनों के तीनों. For that, I can do this. I want type team lead to be employee and manager, which means उसका नाम भी है, start date भी है, department भी है. It has all three of them. Let's try to code it or just copy it. What did I write? कि there is a type called employee. Employee का नाम है and start date है. Let's create a new employee. Let E colon employee equal to name Harkirat, start date, something like this. Or if you want, let's just make it string for now to keep it simple. simple. Start date is 01/02/ whatever 2005. That is an employee. No type errors right now. How can I create a manager? What does a manager have? A name and a department. Name, department, which is, let's say, electricity. A team lead is what? This is what we're trying to learn. It is an employee and a manager, which means it will have a name, it will have a start date, it will have a department, it will have everything from both of them. जो repeated है वो तो एक ही बार आएगी. Whatever is repeated comes once. Start date and department come, of course, once as well. So if I write let team lead now, what will this be? It will have a name, a start date and a department. अगर मैं इन तीनों में से कोई एक भी चीज नहीं दूंगा, it will start to complain. What is it complaining with? Property department is missing. क्या डिपार्टमेंट यहां पे है? नहीं. क्या डिपार्टमेंट यहां पे है? हाँ. Because team lead is employee and manager, it needs the department as well, because it needs all of the fields here and all of the fields here. That is why this is complaining right now. If I add it back, everything works. That is what an intersection is. And similarly, what is a union? Why do I feel like they should be flipped? I could wrong. Union. This seems like a union. Anyways. And a union, or whatever, this or operator says कि या तो ये हो या फिर ये हो. This looks like a union if I'm being honest, but ठीक है चलो. This is ये भी हो और ये भी हो, both of them. That is what this and operator does. And what does the or operator do? या तो ये हो या फिर ये हो. Let whatever type good user has a name and has whatever gifts that we have sent to them, or gift which is also a string. That is a good user. Type bad user has a name and has the IP. Bad users की हम IP भी स्टोर करते हैं हमारे डेटाबेस में. Our user will either be a good user or a bad user. So when I create a user object now, what will it have? It will have a name, and it will either have a gift or an IP. If it is a good user, they will have a gift, bad user IP. They will not have both of them. If I write gift over here, it works. If I write IP over here, it works. If I add both of them, it still works. One second. Why does it still work? कौन बताएगा? Even though I wrote or over here, why does this still work? मैंने तो कहा या तो ये हो या फिर ये हो. Why is it still working? Let me give a hint. Let's say I create a simple object. Let good user name something, gift something, random something, age something. Did not work. Why does it do? I have no idea now. I had an idea. I don't have any idea anymore. Now tell me, why do you think, why does this work? एक ही है सर. हाँ बताओ, एक ही बताएगा.
This is union. Intersection is and.
And means दोनों प्रॉपर्टीज होनी चाहिए, राइट? और मीन्स या तो गुड यूजर होना चाहिए या फिर बैड यूजर होना चाहिए. Then if it is या तो ये होना चाहिए या तो ये होना चाहिए, why is it letting me put both the properties over here? I have no idea. Let's see if someone knows in chat. Also be a $50 bounty since I've missed out here. A union can have either or all the values. ऐसा होता है क्या? a union can have either or all the values. Acha. Makes sense. That makes sense. A union can have either or all the values. उसमें या तो सिर्फ एक की सारी प्रॉपर्टीज होंगी, या फिर दूसरे की सारी प्रॉपर्टीज होंगी, या फिर सारी प्रॉपर्टीज होंगी. इट इज अ यूनियन, राइट? वर्सेज एन इंटरसेक्शन. इसमें तो सारी प्रॉपर्टीज थी. You can have extra fields. Yeah, that makes sense. You can have extra fields. I would have hoped that was not the case, because usually when you use these, you use them like this. Type name equal to string or let's say boolean, something like this. तो इसमें इस केस में you can't be like let name colon name equal to Harkirat true or something like this. तो I was hoping / expecting कि आप एक ही कर सकते हो दोनों में से. यू कैन आइदर हैव दिस और हैव दिस. बट इट सीम्स लाइक वेन एवर यू यूज दिस यूनियन ऑपरेटर, यू कैन हैव आइदर जस्ट दिस और एवरीथिंग ऑल्सो. यू कैन हैव, इफ दिस इज टाइप 1 एंड दिस इज टाइप 2, if you create a union A or B, if you create a union, this is A, this is B, you can have either just this or just this or everything. But when you create an intersection, then you need to have everything. When you create an intersection, you need to have everything. But when you create a union, you can either have just this circle or have just this circle or have the whole thing as well. ये सही है ना? If I do A or B, if I do A or B, then I can either have just the left circle or just the right circle. या तो ये पूरा होगा, या फिर ये पूरा होगा, या फिर इससे कुछ ज्यादा होगा. It can also be something like this. एक कोई प्रॉपर्टी पूरी आनी चाहिए, दूसरी प्रॉपर्टी की प्रॉपर्टीज आ रही हैं तो दैट इज फाइन. यहां पे सब आना चाहिए. इफ यू डू एन एंड, देन यू नीड एवरीथिंग दैट इज कॉमन and everything that is here and everything that is here. That is why it's an and over here. If you do an or, then you need either this full or this full. But if you get some extra properties from here, that is fine. If you get some extra properties from here, that is also fine. ये implementation सही है क्या? मैं सही समझाऊं? Is that right? Someone said no also. So why is that no? And an or boolean algebra. Okay, someone has something. Interface gives error if both the elements are not used. Must use both of the elements, but built-in union one is fine. Error if both the elements are not used. I'm trying to get an intuition about intersection but can't figure it out. This thing. Expression is assignable to either A or B. It must have properties from A or B or both. It must have properties from A or B or both. B is valid. If intersection A and B is assignable to both A and B and therefore must have properties of both A and B, this thing, update. You ask why A and B in your example can take B props. It's not assignable type. There you go. Excess property checks. In our first example of using interfaces, TypeScript lets us pass this thing to something that only expects this thing. Exactly. We also learned about optional properties, this thing. However, combining the two natively would allow you an error to sneak in. For example, something like this. Config square config square color width. But color does not have the same color. Notice given the argument create square, is spelled color instead of color. In plain JavaScript, this sort of fails silently. You could argue that the program it is correctly typed since the width properties are compatible and width is the only thing that is being used over here. So there is no color property present and the extra color property is insignificant. That is true. However, TypeScript takes the stance that it's probably a bug in the code. Object little get special treatment and undergo excess property checking. अच्छा ये तो कुछ और ही है. No, this is something else. ठीक है. We will breathe in, breathe out and rediscuss types a little bit. Even though ये हो गए मतलब इसमें यही था. And I also learned something new today, or was confused by the implementation. Let's write some code and only then we will learn this better. ठीक है? We were supposed to learn, are going to learn interfaces versus types, interfaces and types. So let's do an assignment. Create two types called user and admin. Create a function that takes either a user or an admin as an input and this will be too complicated. Let's start here. Create a function that takes either a user or an admin as an input, returns their or greets them, says welcome name. So let's create an interface called admin. Admin will have a name which is a string. And let's say since it is an admin, it has some permissions, which is again a string. Permissions can be, whatever, super admin, manager, lower manager, things like this. There is another interface called user, which again has a name and does not have any permissions. Let's say this guy has an age, which is a number. You are supposed to create a function called greet, which will take either a user or an admin as an input, greet them, that is it. So what will the type of this user be? Ab ya to you can define it directly over here, user or admin, or you can create a new type called user or admin, which is either user or admin. User or admin. यहां पे आप क्या करोगे? Can I do a console.log user.age? I cannot. TypeScript says कि यार ये user भी हो सकता है, admin भी हो सकता है. Age property does not exist on user or admin. User or admin can be a user, can be an age. जरूरी नहीं है age exists over there. Age might not exist over here. So you can't call .age over here. You can't call .permissions over here. You definitely can call name over here. And what was this called? This was called a union. Why does my intuition say this should be called an intersection? Either way. इसमें अगर देखा जाए तो इनकी जो intersection है, name is what I can use over here. I cannot use age, I cannot use permissions. I can use name over here because it exists in both of them. Admin has a name, user has a name. When I write user or admin, तो name तो पक्का पक्का exist करेगा ही. Age may or may not exist. Permissions may or may not exist. This is one place where you use this or operator. What is the other place where you can use it? You can also use it directly inside something like this. Interface user, which has an age, which let's say can be a number or a string. What am I saying? कि there is an interface called user, जिसकी age can either be a number or a string. तो ये जरूरी नहीं है कि और ऑपरेटर के लिए you need a separate type. This is a question someone asked yesterday. Harkirat, you said you can't use interfaces for these types. And you cannot. You cannot do this. Interface user is equal to this thing or something. But interface के अंदर you can use this or operator and the and operator. Inside an interface you can use it. At the top level, you cannot use an interface for doing unions and intersections. At the top level, you need for it to be, whatever. you need for it to be a type to be able to use these. यहाँ पे क्या है? Number. Something like this. Cool. Oh boy, I got so confused. We'll do one more thing, which is arrays, which is very simple. We'll probably call it after that. And then we'll do some discussions on types versus interfaces. Specifically, we'll do some discussions here. मैं भी थोड़ा confused हूँ इसमें कि when you do a comma b, why does it allow extra properties on one side? We'll discuss that. Give me 15 more minutes. Let's quickly finish arrays, which is very simple. Then I'll come back to unions and intersections, and we'll happy to discuss. We will discuss this and understand exactly how. थोड़ी intuition बनाते हैं उसकी. Cool. Arrays and TypeScripts are very similar. Very simple. Given an array of positive integers as input, return the maximum value in this array. Simple problem है, जल्दी से कोड कर लेते हैं. Forget interfaces and types for 2 minutes. Given an array of numbers, get max. Given an array of numbers, returns the maximum value in that array. Let max value equal to a very small number. For let I equal to 0, I less than nums dot length I plus plus. If nums of I is greater than max value, then max value is nums of I, and return max value. यही होता है implementation of a get max function. If you don't understand the implementation, that is also fine. The problem is इसकी type क्या होगी? It is not an integer anymore. It is an integer array. So it should be a number array. That is how you give arrays as a type. Objects हमें समझ आ गए? How can you give objects as a type? This is how you give arrays as a type. So even if you don't understand the implementation, that is fine. When I'm calling get max over here, I cannot call it with a number. I cannot call it with a string. I have to call it with an array of numbers, because if you look at the input is not a number but a number array. So that is how you define arrays of number as an input. For example, let's say a user can have multiple addresses. थोड़ी देर पहले what were we doing? We said interface address. It has a city, which is a string. It has a pin code, which is a string, let's say. And let's say I write a, whatever, interface user. Now user can have a name, user can have an age, but user can have multiple addresses. So what will I write over here? I will write address array. Okay, this user does not have one address. अगर मुझे एक address होगा, तो I can write this. I can write even this. Okay, the address is going to be this. But since it is an array of addresses, this user will be allowed to have multiple addresses. I can either add an array over here, object followed by an array, or whatever, type followed by an array, or I can do this. Both of the syntax will do the same thing. Now when I define a user, it will have a name, it will have an age, and it will have an addresses array. I cannot create an addresses object. It will start to complain. It needs to be an array. Now it can be an empty array also. It can be an array which has a city pin code also. But it cannot be an object anymore. समझ आ गया ना ये? Simple है ये तो. Hopefully arrays are simple enough. Given a list of users, filter out users that are legal. That is another problem. Can you try that really quickly? Can you code a little bit? तब तक I'll look at Q&A also. Try to code this problem. Given this interface, write a function that takes an array of users as input, returns the legal users, users जिनकी age greater than 18 है. Try to implement this in 10 minutes, 5 minutes maybe, and then I'll code it myself. तब तक let me look at Q&A and see if someone has any ideas of union and intersection की confusion जो मुझे हो रही है. In binary is one. In binary or is one or one is one. What does that mean? In binary, or is one or one is one. मतलब the union of two sets contains all the elements contained in either of the sets. That is exactly what I'm saying. That is what the union is. दोनों चीजें होनी चाहिए. And if I go here, What was the union? Union was or. Union of a set is दोनों चीजें होनी चाहिए. But यहाँ पे और क्यों है फिर? Why is it not called? Why there should be an and over here, right? If it is a union, दोनों के दोनों types का सब कुछ चाहिए. It should be an and over here. That is exactly where the confusion is coming from. The intersection of two sets contains only the elements that are in both the sets. Exactly. Intersection होता है दोनों के दोनों intersect कहाँ कर रहे हैं. That is what an intersection is. But what have we written over here? ये and manager जो इसमें है और जो इसमें है दोनों के दोनों is our intersection. That is where the confusion is coming from. The official definition of unions and intersections is the opposite of what we are doing over here. That is one confusion. The other confusion is कि extra properties कहाँ से आ रही है. But yeah, that is the first confusion in my head as well. हो जाएगी figure out, कोई बात नहीं. Languages are weird. या तो that is the first thought that came to my mind is कि they should probably be flipped. But seems like they aren't flipped. We'll figure out why. हो गई ये problem? Simple enough. Union accepts any of the types listed. Intersection requires all the types. Exactly. That is what you're saying is exactly true. I'm just confused as to why that is, considering the official definition of intersections and unions is a little different, right? You are right over here. What you're saying here is perfect. Unions accept any of the two types listed in TypeScript. This का मतलब है या तो ये मिल जाए या फिर ये मिल जाए या फिर थोड़ा सा ही मिल जाए, ये पूरा मिल जाए ये थोड़ा सा मिल जाए. इंटरसेक्शन रिक्वायर्स ऑल ऑफ देम. पर इंटरसेक्शन की ऑफिशियल डेफिनेशन क्या होती है? इफ दिस इज टाइप 1 एंड दिस इज टाइप 2, व्हाट इज एन इंटरसेक्शन? दिस इज द इंटरसेक्शन, राइट? कहां पे इंटरसेक्ट कर रहे हैं? इंटरसेक्शन यूजुअली मीन्स कि जो चीज दोनों में है वो. इन केस ऑफ टाइपस्क्रिप्ट इंटरसेक्शन मीन्स ये भी पूरा और ये भी पूरा. That is where the confusion is coming from. But if it is called this, it is called this. We go with it. All right. Let me quickly finish the problem. Function filter users takes a user's array as an input. A user array as an input. And what does it return? It returns users that are greater than 18. AI is already helping us with some complicated syntax. If you have not gone through the class around filters, तो ये आपको समझ नहीं आएगा. So let's build a simpler implementation from first principles. Even though this is the cleaner to do it, you should use filter. Let answer equal to empty array. For let I equal to 0, I less than users dot length, I plus plus. If users of I dot age is greater than 18, तब तो इसको आंसर में हम कंसिडर करेंगे. सो answer dot push users of I, else we will not do it. Return answer. This was the expected solution. Write a function called filtered users, takes users as an input, which is an array of this user interface, and returns just the filtered users. तो अगर अब मैं if I do a const filtered users equal to, let me call this function with just an array which has just one element, name, whatever. First name, Harkirat. Last name, Singh. Age 21. So what will it return? It will of course print this array because there is just one user who is above 18 years. But if this user is just 11 years, then of course that user will get skipped. Let's try to run it. I forgot to log it, but you get the idea. It should, print an empty array because एक ही user है that is below the years of 19. If I make this user 20 years old, then it will print the array with the user. Because what is this doing? Finding users that are greater than 18. Why did we do this? Just to understand this syntax. Okay, this is how you take an array as an input. If it is a number array, you write number array over here. If it is a user array, then you can write user array over here. Cool. All right. To recap, today we understood interfaces. थोड़ा सा नहीं समझ आया हमें implementing interfaces. I will do it in an offline video. Again, cover the difference between interfaces and abstract classes. Types we understood. But in both of these things, in types as well as in interfaces, एक extra चीज जो मैंने पढ़ाई, which was कि you can implement interfaces This is something extra. By extra, I mean you don't usually implement interfaces. Most code bases, when you write an interface, use it. Rarely do you create a class out of it. But why did we learn this? Interview question. What is the interview question? Difference between a type and an interface. Interfaces can be implemented by classes. Types cannot be implemented by classes. That is the first difference. Second difference is types let you do unions and intersections. Interfaces don't let you do unions and intersections. You can write type number type num, let's say, equal to number or string. You can do this. You cannot write interface num, whatever, num2 and then number or string. Its internal properties can be two different things, number or string, but at the root level you cannot use this union or intersection operator at the root level. You can't use it at the root level. In an interface, you can use it in a type. That is the second difference between unions and intersections and interfaces and types. Cool. All right. Quite a class. Now people have posted some solutions. Someone said GPT solution. And let's copy it and see what it says. But before that, I think 9:44 class is over. What is left to cover is enums and generics. These are again two more difficult concepts. So let me create an offline video on interfaces, just implementing interfaces, not interfaces. Enums and generics. This is also a slightly hard concept. This was very simple. You'll just read through it, understand. This is simple TypeScript. We still have to cover advanced TypeScript later on. Cool. Now, for the next 15 minutes, before I take Q&A, let's try to see is TypeScript dumb or I am. Is union and intersection what we have written in the slides? I think the answer is yes. Question is, why is it named unions and intersections when it seems to do the opposite thing? Some of you might have a logical answer, so give it to me. If not, 10 minutes, let's discuss this. Then we'll do Q&A, then we will call it. If you understood everything and are not interested in the discussion, then feel free to drop off as well. So thank you for joining. TypeScript थोड़ा सा हो गया है. Implement नहीं किया है. You should eventually, what will you do? You will create express applications, right? The reason we are learning all of this is so that eventually you create express applications. Let me do a npm install or npm init -y to initialize an empty package.json. npm install TypeScript. If you remember from yesterday, to install TypeScript over here. npm install express to create an HTTP server. अब यहाँ पे हमें TypeScript यूज करना है. We have created very simple functions right now. You haven't learned much really. When you actually implement it is when you will see where TypeScript is being used. So if I write this code, npm install TypeScript, you will see very soon that you have to bring its types to your code base as well. I'll create a video on this also. Akash, remind me. 2 videos will come this week offline. One is interfaces, generics, and whatever is left. Second will be this, creating a simple express application using TypeScript, not JavaScript, using TypeScript. So you will see, how you have to implement these, bring these types to your code base as well. Then you start to write your express code. In a few places, you have to override types, things like these. So, a simple code selling application, note taking application, we should build in TypeScript as well. So, हमें समझ आ जाएगा कि यहाँ we are using TypeScript. One more concept that is used very heavily is going to be Zod inference, that is covered in TypeScript Advanced. This will probably will do this next week. इतना तो offline हो नहीं पाएगा, मतलब I know myself. So TypeScript Advanced, this one, more TypeScript APIs. इसकी last slide is also super important if you want to read through it already. Type inference in Zod. This is also used very heavily in a code base, but let's not go there yet. Let's try to come back to our discussion for just 10 more minutes. Okay, why is this called a union and an intersection? And then we'll call it. Then we'll do Q&A. All right. Cool. Looking at Q&A now. Does anyone have anything? Here is the truth or table. So if one is true and one is true, the outcome will be true. That is why it's called a union. Okay. Someone has some reasoning that looks sort of right to me. Let's see. This is what they're saying. Here's the truth table of OR operators. 0, 0 will give 0, 1, 0 will give 1, 0, 1 will give 1, 1, 1 will give 1. That is correct. That is the truth table for ORs. So if there is one true in the in at least one of the unions of A or comma B. So there is one true in at least one of the unions of A comma B, the outcome will be true. That is why it's called a union. So if there is one true in the union of A comma B, the outcome will be true. That is why it's called a union. So if there is one true in the union, the outcome will be true. That is why it's called a union. Okay. Let's say these are my, I think you're getting somewhere. I'm just getting confused. Let's see. Let's say the first type is name, string, age, number. That is our first type. And let's say we have another type where there is age number is there also, and then there is department string over there. So basically, department is 10, age is 11, name is 01. This is the truth table for this specific, two different types, A and B. This is A and this is B. If we take their union, which is A or B, then this will have 1. This will have 1 and this will have 1. That is what you're saying. Union. Oh, of course. Hold on. No, that's the problem, right? Sure, you said this is a union. But जो मेरी final string है उसमें name ना भी हो तो भी it is fine. My final answer could be simply age 21, department CS. Even though the truth table says age should have, or whatever, name should have 1, I don't have to put name over here when I do A or B, right? So that's where the confusion is coming from. Maybe you're onto something जो मेरे को समझ नहीं आ रहा है. Let's see if people have more things. When we intersect two types, we're intersecting their domains, not their properties. When you get the union of two types, you're getting the union of their domains, not their properties. Define domain, AK. What do you mean when you say domain? काफी चुप हो गए हो, आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है.
I was typing.
Oh yeah, tell me. What do you mean when you say domain? We can just discuss. Tell me.
I recently discovered this. The TypeScript can allow infinitely more parameters as compared to interfaces. So if we are implementing some interfaces, we can add multiple parameters.
What are domains over here though? What do you mean by domains?
Domain means like that thing. For example, the first interface has name and age, second interface has age and depth.
Correct.
So we are intersecting their domains, not the exact properties. That's why it's not giving errors for the properties.
एक पोल करो, किसी को समझ आया एके ने क्या बोला है अभी? मे बी आ रहा हो भाई, मेरे को ना समझ आ रहा हो. डू यू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट एके जस्ट सेड? ओके, नो ओनली 20% said yes, so I'm not the dumbest one here. By which I mean 80% don't understand, so I'm not the dumbest. किसी को भी समझ ठीक है, this might just be me. Alright, let's see. I want to see if there's a logical reason for it, or else we'll just accept it. But I hope you guys are getting what the problem is. And my only problem is on how they are named. A lot of people have a lot of reasons.
Can you check this?
Alright, there's a red SO. Demystifying intersections and union types. A few days ago, I made this post around intersections and types in TypeScript. Okay, hold on. Someone also gave some. Let me read one thing from Q&A. In mathematics, a union of a set is a new set containing all the unique elements from the original set. That is correct. Similarly, in TypeScript, a union represents the value that can be of several types. How is that similarly though? That's very different. It is like combining multiple sets of possible values into a single larger set. But it's not combining it. It doesn't expect all the property to be there. Okay, let's read through this. This looks like someone's on to something here. How many upvotes on this one? Not too many. A few days ago, I made a post asking about interface types. After reading the comments, I do a bit of research and working through a few examples. I think I find it finally synced in. That is what I'm waiting for it to sink in. Thanks a lot to the commenters in that original thread. This is my attempt in capturing it in one place, what I've learned, and possibly providing some level of epiphany to someone who is in the same shoes as I was a few days ago. If you already know this, the post will be verbose explanation of what you already know. And I doubt you'll get much out of this. Well, I don't know this, so I'm going to get something out of this. If you end up reading it, feel free to provide feedback as well. What's a type in TypeScript? In whatever this name is, effective TypeScript, he advises us to think of types as a set of values. Item 7. I don't know what item 7 is or where it is pointing. For example, the type, let me zoom this in. For example, the type number is simply a set of all the numbers, an infinite set. The type boolean is a set of booleans, which makes this a finite set. The type string is again an infinite set. The same applies for composite types created with the keyword interface and type. For example, let's take the type point2d. It has an x and a y, which is an interface. Isn't simply the properties that make it up, but the set of values which have properties. Okay, got it. Makes sense. Clearly part of this set. Exactly. Okay, I get something now. A type isn't simply the properties that make it up. Wow, this might finally lead me there. A type isn't simply the properties that make it up. जब मैं कहता हूं कि type rectangle which has width number, height number, तो intuitively you think कि अच्छा, this तो is something which has two properties. But this is actually an infinite set of values like this. x1, y1 and x 1.1, y 1.1 and x 2, y 2.1. It's an infinite set. What is this type? It is not something which has width number, height number. It is this set that you see on the right. ये पूरी चीज is what a type is. You can simply probably make it up as a thing. However, because TypeScript types are open and not sealed like in some programming languages, I don't know what open means here, we'll look into it. Any value with properties x and y that are numbers and possibly infinitely many other properties are also part of point2d. Thus, exactly. Okay. So in TypeScript, if you have x3, y5, this also satisfies that. Because इसमें कुछ extra properties हैं, but since TypeScript types are open and not sealed, इसकी extra properties cannot be ignored, but you can still say that this is a point2d. Because TypeScript types are open, any values with the properties x and y are positive and many properties are also part of point2d. Thus, this type is also part of the set. So हमारा set सिर्फ इतना नहीं है, इसमें ये भी आता है. x2, y4, name Harkirat. Something like this. This is also part of our infinite set. ये भी conforms to this type. Let's keep reading. For assignment of P3, the complaint object literal, but this has nothing to do with object literals not being part of point2d. वही मैं कह रहा था कि तो मैंने भी देखा है कि if you pass some extra properties, TypeScript doesn't complain. Then we saw the example. It started to complain. Now he's giving us a note कि वो क्यों हुआ है? Why did it start to complain? But this has nothing to do with object property of 2D. The value belongs to the set of all values represented by point2D. However, TypeScript uses excess property checks to prevent literal objects with extra properties from being assigned to variables of certain types or being passed to a function, which is why you get this error. We can skirt these checks by first assigning the object literals to an intermediately variable with no explicit type and then remove this. This simply removes the opportunities for excess property checks to kick. Okay, so you can just do this. Const intermediate property equal to this. अब कोई error नहीं आएगा. Let's try this out. नहीं आ रहा है अभी भी. अच्छा, पॉइंट टू डी डिफाइंड नहीं है. इंटरफेस पॉइंट टू डी, x is a number, y is a number. देख रहे हो, पॉइंट टू डी इज एन इंटरफेस जिसमें सिर्फ x एंड y है. आई क्रिएटेड अ रैंडम वेरिएबल कॉल्ड इंटरमीडिएटरी पॉइंट. इसमें x, y और 4 चीजें और हैं. Still this line of code does not complain. If I write it directly, it will complain because it has these excess checks that it is talking about. कि वो कुछ extra checks वो कर लेता है, but you can actually get around it. This is also part of our set. Extra properties दोगे तो भी you are fine. X, Y, name, whatever you put, this is still part of our set. Now we're getting somewhere. This raises the question, would a literal object without an XY property assigned to an intermediate variable this thing? The answer is no, because the value wouldn't satisfy the condition of this thing. हम ये नहीं कर सकते कि इसको x दिया ही नहीं and then we expect कि एरर नहीं आएगा. तब तो एरर आएगा, बट एक्स्ट्रा कुछ दे दिया तो एरर नहीं आएगा. If you give it x, y and some extra properties, no error. If you give it nothing or miss some properties, then of course there will be an error. Let's keep going. Now what we know about, now that we know a bit about TypeScript, we're ready to understand intersections and union types. अब शायद मुझे भी थोड़ा हिट कर रहा है कि क्या होगा इसका रीजन. Let's start with the following setup. This thing point2d has an x and y, named entity has a name, type this thing is this thing and this thing. आ गया मुझे समझ, पर समझाना बहुत मुश्किल होगा. वही. What we were missing was कि when you create a type, you have not created something which has a width and a height. You have created this set. कि भाई ये सारी चीजें इसको satisfy करती हैं. All of these satisfy this. This is what my rectangle type is. Now, if I create another type called name, let's say, जैसे उस बंदे ने लिखा, this is one type I've created, rectangle. This is the set of that type. मेरे से इंटरव्यू में आओ कभी, मैं ये पूछूंगा तुमसे, हालत खराब हो जाएगी. This is, क्या कह रहे हो? You can answer? Yeah. Did you know this पहले से या did you Google as time went by today? Right.
I know this, but I haven't known the exact wordings like this, domains and all.
Got it. Type name, let's say, which has name, which is a string. Something like this. And इसका superset क्या होगा, या इसका जो भी मतलब set of values क्या होगा? It looks something like this. Name, Harkirat, and more properties, whatever. More such properties. This type is nothing but a infinite number of values that look like this. This type is nothing but an infinite number of values that look like this. Now, if I do rect and name, what do I want? कि जो इसमें है और जो इसमें है, I want to merge these two supersets. This and this. हाँ. When I merge these two supersets, उसमें क्या क्या होगा? हाँ. It will have, when I merge these two supersets. Yes. फिर कंफ्यूज हो गया. रीड ही करना पड़ेगा, नहीं हुआ. I have not reached there yet. Seeing this, we might ask ourselves, in property is the collection of properties point2d and name entity instead of simply the empty set, since point2d and name entity have no shared properties in common. That is correct. Seeing this, we might ask ourselves why this thing is the collection of properties from this thing and this thing instead of simply an empty set, since they have no intersection. And name entities share no properties in common. That is correct. However, it's worth reminding ourselves that a type is nothing, isn't the collection of properties, but the set of all the values. Exactly. A type is just a set of these values. This type is just this type is just this. When you do and, what are you doing? And is called what? And is called एन इंटरसेक्शन. फिर कंफ्यूज हो गया. The point 2D is the set of values with properties x and y which are both of type number. However, like we pointed earlier, TypeScript types are open, and thus any value with at least property x and y will satisfy this type. Correct. Thus, in some corner of point 2D universe, there is a subset of values with property name as string. What was this called again? Yes, now I get it. This is what the rectangle interface is. It is all of these. And somewhere in the corner of this universe, there is also something like this. It is this. Some of these are this, that properly follow this format. Some of them are this, which properly follow this format and have some random property here. Some of them are this, which have x, y and name. इस universe में all of the things that conform to this rectangle type are this, and somewhere in this universe there is this. ये हमारे important set of values हैं. It can be this. अब हमें क्या लेना है? हमें लेना है intersection. Similarly, क्या यहाँ पे there will be in some corner there will be some properties which have name and have x and have y. Yes, there will be. अब इसका और इसका intersection क्या होगा? It will be things that have both the properties, right? The intersection of this set and the intersection of this set is nothing but every things that have x, y name. क्योंकि it can have more properties also. बट यहां पे अगर सिर्फ एक नेम वाली है, वो यहां पे कभी नहीं होगी. इफ देर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड नेम हियर, ओनली हैज द नेम की, इट विल नॉट बी हियर. इफ देर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड एक्स हियर, वाई हियर, बट डजंट हैव द नेम, इट विल नॉट बी हियर. तो द इंटरसेक्शन इज जो यहां पे भी है एंड जो यहां पे भी है, विच इज दिस. तो जो फाइनल टाइप होगा रेक्ट एंड नेम, उसकी जो प्रॉपर्टीज होंगी वो ये इंटरसेक्शन होगी. एंड इसमें आपको ये तीनों प्रॉपर्टीज तो कम से कम दिखेंगी ही. यू विल फाइंड एट लीस्ट दीज 3 प्रॉपर्टीज. यू माइट फाइंड मोर. You know, there might be a value over here that looks like this: x, y, name, and some other key called random. That will be here also. X, y, name, and some key called random. This will also be part of the intersection. This will also be part of the intersection. So, all such properties will have x there, y there, and name there, which is why rect and name is an intersection. वाह जी वाह. किस किस को समझ आया? x तुम्हें तो आए क्या? पोल करो. x and y is an intersection because we are finding the intersection of this superset and this superset. एक बार फिर से समझाऊंगा. अब अपनी मुझे समझ आ गया तो अपनी उसमें समझाऊंगा. द प्रॉब्लम वॉज, प्रॉब्लम से शुरू करते हैं फिर सोल्यूशन पे आएंगे. ये तो वैसे अगर किसी इंटरव्यूअर ने पूछा है तो भाई वेरी बैड इंटरव्यूअर, मतलब तुम्हारी हालत खराब करने को आ रहा है. और अगर ये तुमने आंसर कर दिया वैसे, मतलब फिर तो कैसे नहीं सेट करेगा भाई. ओके, देयर इज अ टाइप यूज रेक्टेंगल विच हैज अ विड्थ विच इज अ नंबर, अ हाइट विच इज अ number. There is another type called name, where there is a name called a string. अब जब मैं कहूंगा rect and name, what comes to your mind? हर किया this comes to my mind कि यार rect, if I write type full equal to rect and name, if I write this, तो दिमाग में क्या आता है? दिमाग से इसके and हो रहा है, मतलब width भी होगी, height भी होगी, name भी होगी. This is what comes to mind when we create a third type which is this and this. तो सुन के तो लग रहा है कि यूनियन नहीं हो रहा. You are doing the union of the properties over here and the properties over here. You are doing a union. तो इसका नाम तो union होना चाहिए. When you look at it, it seems like that this should be called a union because you are doing the union of the properties over here and the union of the properties over here. Let's do a poll. ये समझ आया कि मेरे को क्यों लग रहा था कि इसका नाम union होना चाहिए. I was saying again and again, if A and B is happening, it should be called a union. It should not be called an intersection. This was the reason. Because I was doing the union of the properties over here and the properties over here. What was the first statement over here? ये कोई बंदा होगा, author probably. He has a book called Effective TypeScript, where he advises to think of types as set of values. ये अगर समझ आ गया तो सब समझ आ जाएगा. He advises to think of types as a set of values. He says कि ये type isn't width number, height number. No. This type is a set of values. क्या values इस type को adhere कर रही हैं? What are the type values that conform to this specific type? Width 1, height 1, name हरकीरत. ये भी कर रही है. हरकीरत इसमें तो एक्स्ट्रा प्रॉपर्टी है, name. Yes. But TypeScript uses open types. Because TypeScript types are open and not sealed like in some other languages. Open type का मतलब क्या है कि यार ये जो सबसेट बनाया है आपने, सेट ऑफ वैल्यूज बना रहे हो, इसमें अगर विड्थ और हाइट आ गई, गुड इनफ. इसमें विड्थ हाइट नेम आ गया, दैट इज ऑल्सो फाइन. इट इज स्टिल पार्ट ऑफ दिस सबसेट. इसमें विड्थ हाइट एज आ गई, दैट इज ऑल्सो फाइन. ऑल ऑफ दीज आर द वैल्यूज ऑफ दिस टाइप. ये टाइप इनमें से कुछ भी हो सकता है. सिमिलरली यहां पे क्या हो सकता है? समथिंग दैट हैज अ नेम. व्हाट विल इट्स वैल्यूज बी? इसकी वैल्यू होगी यार या तो सिर्फ नेम हरकीरत, या फिर होगी ऐसे नेम हरकीरत एज 21, या फिर होगी ऐसे नेम हरकीरत विड्थ 1, हाइट 1. कितनी भी कीज डाल लो, ऑल ऑफ देम आर पार्ट ऑफ दिस टाइप. एज लॉन्ग एज नेम इज देयर, एक्स्ट्रा प्रॉपर्टीज कितनी भी डाल दो, इट इज फाइन. व्हाई? बिकॉज टाइपस्क्रिप्ट हैज ओपन टाइप्स एंड नॉट सील्ड टाइप्स. सेम थिंग इज ट्रू ओवर हियर. अब इसका और इसका इंटरसेक्शन क्या है? व्हाट इज द इंटरसेक्शन ऑफ दीज टू सेट्स? क्या ये नेम हरकीरत कभी यहां पे आएगा? नहीं, उसमें विड्थ और हाइट है ही नहीं. क्या ये विड्थ 1 हाइट 1 कभी यहां आएगा? नहीं. width 1 height 1 doesn't have a name. It can never exist over here. Whatever exists over here needs to at least have the name. Width height extra aa jaye, that is fine. But if you look at this, it is part of this guy. It is also part of this guy. The intersection of these two sets will definitely have a width, a height and a name. नेम यहां के लिए चाहिए, विड्थ हाइट यहां के लिए चाहिए. ये तीन तो होंगे ही. इफ देयर आर एक्स्ट्रा, दैट इज फाइन. द इंटरसेक्शन ऑफ बोथ ऑफ देम विल हैव एटलीस्ट अ नेम एंड अ विड्थ एंड अ हाइट, विच इज वाई व्हेन यू डू दिस एंड दिस, इट फील्स लाइक कि हाँ भाई, यू हैव डन अ यूनियन ऑफ द प्रॉपर्टीज ओवर हियर. बट व्हाट इज रियली हैपनिंग इज यू हैव डन इंटरसेक्शन ऑफ द values over here. You are not doing a union of these attributes. You are doing an intersection of whatever is in this universe, whatever is in this universe. That is why this is called an intersection. And similarly, union क्या है? Type, whatever, u equal to rect or name. Rect और name क्या होता है? क्या यहां क्या तो सब कुछ आ जाए, या फिर यहां का सब कुछ आ जाए? या तो यहां का सब कुछ आ जाए, या फिर यहां का सब कुछ आ जाए. It should either have both width and height, or should have name. Extra आ जाए, that is fine. But या तो width और height होनी ही चाहिए, या फिर name होना ही चाहिए. And if you do a union of both of them, उसमें क्या होगा? उसमें ये सब भी होंगे, उसमें ये सब भी होंगे. Union would be everything that is present here everything that is present here. If you add both of them, what is that? That is या तो width height है ही है, that is everything over here, या तो name है ही है, that is everything over here, या तो width height name तीनों है, तो ये भी है, ये भी है. That is why this is called a union. One last poll. Did we understand this? I'm going to do Q&A now. I understood it twice, so I hope I understood it. I did understand it, but hopefully you did it as well. But let's do questions now. Q&A is open. Akash, please do a poll. Okay, we did understand this. I mean, 80%, sort of. How are we able to use interfaces for union intersection? You can only use type, right, in the article. Where are we using interfaces for union and intersections? Okay. Interface first. Interface name string. I can write a type, name and point, which is point 2D and name. This can be an interface. This can be an interface. ये root thing जो है, this cannot be an interface. You cannot write this interface this equal to this. So define करेगा, that should be a type. Things on the right can be a वो as well. कोई मीम बनाना है यार, आज तो बनता है कुछ इंटरफेस वर्सेस टाइप्स पे ऑन ट्विटर. इन टाइपस्क्रिप्ट, union makes a type more flexible while intersections make it stickier. In maths theory, you draw the many intersections. To summarize my understanding, intersections were all the properties. So what your understanding is what my understanding was initially, but that is sort of incorrect. What your understanding is what I understood also initially. In TypeScript, union makes the type more flexible, while intersection makes it more stricter. That is correct. In math theory, union includes all the elements, more inclusive, while intersection includes only common elements, more stricter. Yeah, I mean, you could say that, but okay, your understanding is correct. And requires all the properties from everything. Union requires properties from either one of them. That is true. But the problem was in the name. If it requires properties from all of them, isn't that a union? Union of all the properties. That is where the disconnect was coming from. But it is not a union of all the properties. It's a union of all the values in the set, which is why, it's called a union versus intersection. All right. More Notion docs. Oh, let me see. Which question?
When we do number or Boolean, why that doesn't happen?
Oh, wow. Let's see that. Where is that post?
Yeah, this one.
Here? There you go. Now it should make sense why this thing is the empty set and never in number universe you cannot find. Exactly. Makes sense, right? My question was around or वैसे, but हाँ ठीक है, exactly. Number world will never have a string world will never have a number, so they will never have a union, or they will never have an intersection. Sorry. All right. Someone also, now I think a few people have their own implementations. I'll look at all of them. Cool. Time to look at Notion docs. Clarification and fundamental read everything. Union intersection types apply to the type itself rather than the individual properties of the type. That is correct. Here we can access the properties of both the types of the union. Right? The meaning of the intersection is union language. Pet must have both bark and meow. Yeah, sort of understand it. I don't know. This is good. I would have understood this better with examples. If you would have written, some types over here, some types over here, and then the intersecting types here. That would have been easier to understand. But here, people take screenshots. This is also a good explanation of what we understood. All right. By the way, this is the solution that you want. User is kind, this thing, name, this thing's email, this thing, admin is name, this thing, admin level number, this thing. or admin. Yeah, that looks right. And what do we have here? Oh, are you looking out? Oh, you are available for hire. I mean, I haven't looked at much. It's just the number of projects that I'm seeing are higher, and some Web3 projects, and there's this Web3 company hiring. All right, let's see. It seems like you've graduated. You're a founder. Very cool. UI is decent, not great. Pretty bad. Very similar to that other guy who we referred. This looks like that Externity UI. Clerk everywhere. You just have landing pages. The ground is open, by the way. If you think you're good fit for this Web3 role, full stack, one stack, just post your portfolios in chat. We'll do a quick one. This one's like average. I wouldn't say this. You're ready. Some more polish is needed everywhere. Cool. The tech lead only includes properties common to both employee and manager. Either. If it is either, why is it a union? You said includes all properties from either. That means it's an intersection. या तो यहाँ की properties या फिर यहाँ की either. I think you're right. While developer includes all properties from either this thing or this thing. Okay, let's say you have a better explanation here. खुला ही नहीं. Replace my content. Union combines all the values of the elements from the two sets. Exactly, or intersection. Exactly. And क्या होता है? ये and ये. और क्या होता है? और तो ये होता है वैसे this और this. पर ठीक है. I mean हाँ. मुझे मेरी understanding आ गई. आपको आपकी आ गई तो सही है. If you can explain it, great. As long as you understand what's happening, it's good. Scoped error in TypeScript. I'm assigning two variables with the same name in two different files. Yeah, it does happen. You will see an error. To be able, no, there's no concept you're missing. If you have, move it to a different folder. If you have, in the same folder you have, whatever, value 1, let x equal to 1, and then, same, you have it here. You will see this error that says cannot redeclare blocked script variable x. What you can do is move this to a new folder where you can define that global variable. So, that didn't fix it either. क्या होता है इसका solution is like a standard solution over here. The reason is hence is all the global variables get rolled up in TypeScript, so they all exist in the same scope eventually. तो इसका solution क्या होता था? यही तो होता था. I mean, you can change the name. That's one solution, but like there is a standard solution to this as well, which I'm forgetting now. Akash, do you know, or can you Google what is the standard solution to this? One is you change the name or whatever, but I could have sworn if you move it to a separate folder it works, but that is not the case. So yeah, it's a common problem, and I'm sure Akash will find you a solution very soon. I saw this one. All right. But there is a couple of details that can be clarified. Types versus interfaces. While types and interfaces in TypeScript can both aggregate data and define objects, there are some key differences. Interface primarily used to define object shapes, but can be extended. Oh yeah. One thing I forgot to tell was you can actually extend interfaces as well. While types are more flexible in defining unions and intersections. ये तो हमें समझ आ गया. Types are more used to define unions and intersections. Interfaces you can extend, which is one thing I forgot to tell. We should add it to the slides. If there is an interface user name string, you can define an interface admin extends user, which has whatever age number. So you can one interface can extend another interface, which means इसकी सारी properties जो हैं वो यहाँ पे extra आ जाएंगी. And this is one use case of interfaces, which types don't support. What else was there? Quantitative state interface can actually also handle intersections through extends. Yes, अगर देखा जाए तो क्या हो रहा है यहाँ पे? You cannot use the or the and syntax. You cannot type x equal to admin or user, but you can do this, right? Okay, interface admin extends user. उसका मतलब क्या है? ये सारी प्रॉपर्टीज भी यहां आ जाएंगी, and the original properties are there. So अगर देखा जाए तो intersections you can do by just extending. Unions you cannot do. You cannot take either of this or common properties from both of them. But intersections you can easily do, right? जो दोनों में है वो आ जाए final type में. You can do by just extending the original thing. That is one thing. What else did we have? Detailed corrections, unions. It is correct that type allows for union types. Interfaces can, however, cannot represent unions directly. Therefore, type is the right choice. Yes. Hope you guys get it. मतलब ऐसा नहीं है कि interfaces have some special interfaces cannot support unions. It's just there is no equal to. You cannot do interface user, whatever, A or B, something like that. So you have to do a type user equal to this thing. And okay, it's correct that types allow for union types. That is correct. Interfaces, however, cannot represent unions directly. Therefore, using type is the right choice. Makes sense. Intersections. Both types and interfaces can use intersection-like features, although it's slightly different ways. While type uses and, this uses extends. समझ आ गया ये कि यहाँ पे आप and use कर सकते हो. Type x equal to a and b, or you can type a and b. A is a type and b is a type, or a is an interface and b is an interface. Or you can type interface x extends b, and यहाँ पे you can define all the properties of a. In fact, you can extend a comma b यहाँ पे, or there should be a way to extend both of them. If not, you can write interface x1 extends b, interface x2 extends x1, and this can be empty. So x1 extends b, x2 extends a, and then whatever interface x extends. नहीं, फिर वहीं आ गई बात. I think you can extend more than one type as well. Let's try it out. Type a equal to name Harkirat, type b equal to age number, interface x extends a comma b. Can you do something? A and b. A extend multiple interfaces. So you can't do it सीधा. How can you do it? Export interface this thing extends a comma b. हाँ तो दिखा तो रहा है. Oh, it does work. It's just not giving me the right. Let user equal to x equal to name a21. There we go. So you can do this as well. You can extend both types a and b. So rather than doing a and b like we did in type, you can create an interface which extends both a comma b. That will be the same thing. Cool. What else was mentioned here? It's a good doc. कहाँ गया? There we go. There are both good. Yeah, both can achieve the same thing. You cannot write the syntax in one way, but yes, in an interview, if someone asks, you should tell कि हाँ, you can do intersections in interfaces as well. Type में you can do it in one syntax. Type में you can do unions and intersections. Interfaces में also you can sort of do intersections by using extend and extending the whatever other two types. unions correct, types हाँ तो to summarize, types can do unions, interfaces cannot do unions. Types can do intersections, interfaces can also do intersections by using extends. Intersection का मतलब क्या है कि ये भी आए और ये भी आए, तो what you can do is you can just extend A and B to create the final thing. What is the second thing? Partially correct, types allow intersections by and, but interface can achieve it via extends. Cool है, cool है. Great doc. What else? One second. Multiple times, I don't know whether I can make API using JavaScript because I only see resources on Python. By the way, which model, PyTorch, and source or background integration? Do you have any idea? Want to ask whether can I make API? You can make an API call using JavaScript. Most of these languages, or whatever, GPT models or even SDKs are present in Tensor. In JavaScript also there is TensorFlow.js. And what is the second question? By the way, model is in PyTorch, not TensorFlow. Then probably go with whatever, some Python. Generally also don't use TensorFlow.js. I don't even know if it's being maintained. Let's see. TensorFlow. If you are going to use whatever, if you are building an AI application, last month was the last commit. So if you are building an AI application, just just use Python for the backend and for whatever SDKs you are using. Can idea if you can? I hope that answers your question. All right. What else? Oh why? Long last 10:30 already. Shall we call it here, guys? Where is it? All right. Hopefully it was an insightful class. It was for me. I learned about intersections and unions. Any more questions before we call it? Okay, let's see. Oh, yeah. Pretty decent lead code clone. Nothing happens when I click on the problem though. Practice. It's just this page or? Yeah, nothing is happening when I click on these. Alright, that's one. This one's decent. Am I not able to scroll? Okay, it's just my mouse. What the hell? Okay. Looks pretty good. Both of them look pretty good. You're just starting out, I can tell, and keep at it. I have seen you reviewing projects of students saying that they're using some kind of API. Can you explain how are they implementing API calls? Sorry. Projects of students, and you said they are using some kind of API. Can you explain how are they implementing API calls? I don't understand the question. They're using, I have no idea what you mean by this. What APIs am I reviewing? You might be asking about this. You can go here and whatever code you're writing, deploy it, and try to test it against a bunch of tests. That's probably what you mean, but I don't know. That's the only thing that people are using. 3 months later, I joined this GitHub I've created as yesterday. Oh, it's hard code everything to make it generic. Course I will make it perfect. I don't know what projects to do next. Try building something like Probo. I think that's pretty good. I saw this yesterday. Pretty starting, still starting things out. So yeah, it's pretty good. Project we, standard. What is a good project? Make HeyGen if you can. Something that lets you. Let's say to start off just text to speech to text, and then whatever image captioning, removing some part of an image, talking to an image, things like these. That's a good project. तुमने front end बना लिया उसका. If you made the landing page, might as well make something, whatever, text to speech, let's say. All right, what I get, union, combine, this thing. Exactly, and there is some value. Exactly. So you got it. You are right. That is exactly the right explanation. Quick Vim tip. Maybe you already know this. I was in 2D Metaverse video. Noticed that you were selecting everything inside quotes of performing the delete. You said to DI double quotes, delete everything inside the double quotes. Yeah, I do that. What was I doing? Single quotes. Yep, I do this. I don't know why I did not do it there, but I know DI, whatever. Curly braces, empty braces, things like these. I was selecting everything inside quotes and performing the delete instead. Oh, so you were saying I was doing VI exclamation D? I don't know. I don't know. If I was doing it, I was probably doing DI, whatever, double quotes. But if not, then I was just probably with my mouse and, selecting it. I know this one though, but like, thanks for the session. All right, cool guys. We'll call it here. Have a good night. Bye-bye. Ooh, long class. Oh, I wasn't sharing my screen, but hey, I wasn't doing much.